So you're basing this constitutionality of this on Article 2. Is that correct, where it says each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors?
Well, that's part of it. That's where it indicates that it's up to the states to determine how to allocate their electors.
Has there been any history in the country of states giving up that power to external situations, like the vote of the national vote, the total national vote?
No, this is new.
Okay. Is there anything in that language that in the Constitution that explicitly empowers the states to select electors based on the outcome of the national popular vote?
In the Constitution, you mean?
Yes.
It just says the states pick the electors.
So basically you're saying is that the states have the power to basically do whatever they want in determining who the electors of the president should be?
Yes.
Okay. So if, say, a group of states from the Northeast wanted to enter into a compact that says we're only voting for the Democratic presidential candidate, they could enter into that compact?
They could. They don't really have to at the moment, but
right. Well,
they could. But
or the southern states said only the Republican candidate.
Yes, they could.
They could. Okay. That's surprising to me that they could do that, but okay. So maybe they could say we only vote for a person from this group of states, whether it be from the Northeast or maybe the Midwestern states get together and said we're only voting for a president from the Midwest. They could enter into that type of an agreement, and that would be constitutional?
Listen, you're giving a lot of, I don't want to use a bad word, but let's say ridiculous examples. You can come up with all kinds of scenarios, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about states from across the country getting together and having enough states so that they're the majority of the country. We're not talking about some regional thing. I mean, right now, in essence, to a certain degree, there are major regional differences in terms of election results. Some areas of the country, as a group, vote heavily Republican. There are other areas that are much more Democratic. And so when you just said that, well, should the states of the Northeast get together, when I said they don't have to, because those states are already voting a certain way. And that could change over time. There's nothing to say that in 50 years, New York won't again become a swing state under the current rules. But you can cite a lot of examples. You can say, well, maybe the state of New York and California can form a compact. I suppose anything's possible, but it's of no consequence. We're talking here about a group of states from all over the country in a nonpartisan way, making what in essence is an agreement, a deal, to do something a certain way to accomplish a very worthwhile result, which is provided for in the Constitution. We're not making up something here. We're not creating something out of nothing. The reason why we're debating this is because we can do this under the Constitution.
Well, that's what I question. I bring up those examples because what may seem absurd to us right here, right now, may not be absurd to somebody 50 years from now. And to say that we're going to undermine the entire basis of the way that we elect a president based on the Constitution, that we can undermine it through an agreement amongst the states, seems patently unconstitutional to me.
Well, it's not. I'm not the Supreme Court, but I can assure you it's not. And we're not undermining anything. If anything, we're looking at something a little differently than they did back in the 18th century, when, as our colleague indicated, the goal was to limit the number of people who can be part of a process, limit it both based on gender, on race, on religion, on whether they own property, on wealth. It was limited to a tiny number of people, and at that, the electors weren't even chosen by the people, say the way governors were at the time. They were chosen by the state legislature. So the process of electing a president at the beginning of our existence was, we would not, nobody here could possibly consider that democratic. It's evolved over time to the point where, both based on the fact that many, many more people can vote, obviously, and the fact that now the people of the states themselves vote on who to elect as the electors. But even that has not gone to the logical conclusion of what's democratic, which is that every individual person should be able to participate in a presidential election equally, regardless of what part of the country they're in, regardless of what state they're in.
But I think that was the wisdom of the framers of the Constitution, to provide means of which to change the manner in which we run and organize the country through the amendment process.
Well, that's one of the ways they provided to do things, but it wasn't the only way.
Well, I believe that this way is unconstitutional. Are you familiar with the ways that the Constitution, the words of the Constitution that delegate the power to the states to elect people to Congress?
Okay.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, it also gives the states the power to create the manner in which Congress people are elected, in much the same way that Article 2 does.
And we elect members to the House of Representatives in exactly the same way as we're going to elect, if this becomes a reality, the President of the United States. One person, one vote, everybody has an equal vote. Well, that's not the case now.
I understand that, but what I'm trying to get to is the language in Article 1 that determines how the state determines the manner in which Congress people are elected is very similar language in Article 2 that determines the manner in which we elect electors to vote for president in the Electoral College. And my point is that the U.S. Supreme Court in U.S. Term Limits, Inc. v. Thornton actually said that it was unconstitutional to put term limits on Congress people because it violated that provision of the Constitution under Article 1. So with that same thinking, really, to create a power within the states to give up a power based on a national popular vote, it's not in the Constitution, that too would be unconstitutional.
That would not be correct.
I think the Supreme Court might disagree.
Perhaps they would, but I don't think so. But you don't know any better than I do what they would do. But what the Constitution does do is it gives to the states the right to determine how and who their electors are.
As it does with Congress people. But still, the states are not allowed to put term limits on Congress people.
Well, we already have automatic term limits, I guess, on electors now, don't we? They're elected to do one thing, which is to come together to elect the President of the United States. Right now, 48 states choose their electors in a particular way, which is winner take all. That's what each of those states have provided. Those states have the right, including New York, to decide that. Just like those states have the right to say, we're going to be part of a group of states that will elect the winner of the election.
You understand the distinction, though, the distinction between deciding on how you're going to allocate your electors based on what happens inside your state versus an external factor, which is how it goes in the national popular vote. That's a totally different set of rules that undermines the basis of the Constitution, the constitutional way to elect a president.
I guess we disagree on that.
I guess we do. Thank you, Mr. Dinowitz. On the bill.
On the bill, Mr. Walter.
I think what's happening here, what we've heard from some speakers and from the sponsor, is that confusing majoritarianism with democracy. We have a number of things that we do that are non-majoritarian, but still democratic. Every state has 2 senators, despite population. A president can veto, one president, one man, can veto legislation passed by a majority of the people popularly elected representatives. Lifetime appointments of federal judges. Unequal representation in the U.S. House of Representatives, depending on the size of the state. The example of Wyoming was used. They have only 600,000 people in the state of Wyoming, yet they get 2 senators and a congressman. That is non-majoritarian, yet we can't say that it's not democratic, because it is. So to take the principles of our nation and to turn them upside down under an agreement that's not even a constitutional amendment, an agreement amongst other states, and assume that we have the power as a state to upend the workings of the Constitution, I believe is flawed. And I think it completely turns on its head the way that the Constitution was drafted, with keeping in mind the idea that we do have the power to change it. And that was the wisdom of the framers of the Constitution. We have the power to change it if we so choose through an amendment process. And that's the proper way to address this issue, not an end run around the Constitution. Thank you.